The file begins. Winter air in 2026 London was not merely cold. It was steeped in the scent of a festering secret, a fresh batch of revelations that, slowly but surely, were reducing a once royal reputation to ruins. In early January, the United States Department of Justice, methodically as a pathologist, was dissecting further layers of the Epstein case. Pause. The name Andrew Mauntbеттен-Vindзora resurfaced once again in these digital catacombs, not as a coincidence, but as an inevitable consequence. Public consciousness, barely having digested the previous servings of filth, was once again choking. In February, not just names but photographs emerged, silent witnesses to long-past events. Each image a pulsebeat, marking the final hours of past invincibility. An electronic mail, one of which, allegedly authored by Ghislaine Maxwell, served as an unambiguous confirmation of the authenticity of the photograph. The very one where Andrew appears alongside Virdziniu Джуффре. This document is not mere ink on paper. It is a verdict with no right to appeal. The fear of the inevitable, of the final collapse, was becoming almost palpable. The wreckage of an empire, once seemingly unshakable, began to crumble under the weight of these irrefutable facts. It will only get worse from here. Royal privileges, like old paintings salvaged from a burning house, were irrevocably lost. In October 2025, Charles III signed the final verdict, the stripping of the title of Prince. Pause. Andrew Mauntbеттен-Vindзora. That name sounded like an epitaph. Then came the exile from Royal Lodge, a slow, humiliating displacement from palatial interiors to a smaller, temporary haven at Sandringham. First wood farm, then marsh farm. Each move a new nail in the coffin of a former life. New revelations like poisonous spores infiltrated the most protected corners of Buckingham Palace. The phrase "Mrs. Windsor will arrive shortly, please let her pass and escort her upstairs" was not merely a code word. It was a key unlocking doors for clandestine visits that bypassed security measures. And not just women. It was an act of compromise, not only personal, but also national. Allegations of transmitting confidential information to Epstein did not go unnoticed. Thames Valley Police, with the King's support, launched an investigation. The shadow of the bunker, once seemingly impregnable, now covered all his actions. This is not merely an inventory of sins, it is an anatomy of a fall. A final one. A final one. But before the finality, there was a beginning. A different kind of beginning. Andrew, the golden boy. Born into a gilded cage, yet granted the illusion of choice. He was the favored son, the one who charmed. His naval career, a uniform tailored for a hero. Pause. Falklands, a war, a brief shining moment of perceived duty. He was the dashing prince, the one with the ready smile. The public adored him. He married a vivacious redhead, a stark contrast to the quiet decorum of the palace. Their union, a whirlwind of flashbulbs and tabloid headlines. They were the Randy Andy and Fergie show. Pause. A spectacle. This was his world. Opulence, privilege, unfettered access. He moved through it with an unshakable confidence, a belief in his own untouchability. The social circles he cultivated were vast, glittering. They stretched from royal courts to the nascent playgrounds of the super-rich. It was in these circles, amidst the clinking of champagne glasses and the whispers of power, that the foundations of a future, far darker inventory of sins were inadvertently laid. His charm, once his greatest asset, became a key. a key to doors he should never have opened. The key, once turned, opened to a particular kind of darkness. It was in the late 1990s, when the glitter of his royal status still shone with undiminished intensity, that Andrew's path first intersected with Jeffrey Epstein. Not in a quiet library, but amidst the relentless hum of high society. The introduction, meticulously orchestrated, likely came through Ghislaine Maxwell, a woman who understood the architecture of influence and the art of connection. Epstein, a financier shrouded in a peculiar aura of wealth and mystery, offered a different kind of power. Not inherited, but self-made. A network that promised access to an even more exclusive echelon. Private jets, island retreats, discreet gatherings where the usual rules seemed not to apply. The initial meetings were not scandalous on their surface. They were simply connections, business, friendship, a mutual appreciation for the finer and often darker aspects of life beyond public scrutiny. Pause. A fatal gravitation. This was the genesis of a relationship that would become the bitter inheritance of his later years. The environments were always opulent, always private, always removed. Each handshake, each shared journey on a private jet was a small, almost imperceptible step towards the eventual anatomy of a fall. The concrete of their bond, seemingly strong, was poured over a foundation of sand and secrets. And deep breath, low gravelly voice, slow deliberate pacing, a hint of weariness and world weariness. The concrete of their bond, seemingly strong, was poured over a foundation of sand and secrets. Slight pause, a heavy sigh. It was upon this unstable ground that the first tremors of collapse registered, not from within the gilded cages of power, but from the raw, undeniable voice of a survivor. Voice drops, becomes almost a whisper, yet carries weight. Vирджинию Джуффре. A name that would become synonymous with the unraveling. Her claims, delivered with the quiet, chilling precision of a legal document, spoke of exploitation, of abuse, of underage encounters facilitated by the very network Andrew had come to inhabit. Pace quickens slightly, voice hardens, a touch of bitterness. The initial allegations were not whispers in dark corners. They were a direct assault. A civil lawsuit, filed in a New York court, laid bare the specifics. 3 instances of sexual abuse in 2001, in London, New York, and on Epstein's private island. Voice trails off slightly, a hollow echo. Each location a waypoint on a map of indiscretion. Andrew's defense was immediate, vehement. He denied everything. Absolute and categorical. His legal team moved with the practiced efficiency of a royal guard defending a crumbling fortress. They questioned Giuffre's credibility. They argued the statute of limitations. They sought to dismiss the case, to make it disappear like so many inconvenient truths before it. Voice becomes more narrative, yet still tinged with cynicism. The media, initially cautious, soon found itself awash in the grim details. The infamous photograph, a young Giuffre alongside a smiling Andrew, Ghislain Maxwell in the background, became an emblem. A silent witness to a story the palace wished to bury beneath layers of denial and decorum. This legal battle, fought across continents and in the unforgiving glare of public opinion, was not merely about reputation. It was about the very fabric of inherited privilege, now fraying at the edges. A moment of quiet reflection, a deep, pained exhale, a profound vulnerability exposed, long, heavy pause, a single, mournful word. The cost, even then, was immeasurable. The concrete of their bond, seemingly strong, was poured over a foundation of sand and secrets. The weight of those secrets, however, eventually cracked the facade. By 2025, the slow, agonizing inventory of his sins began to accelerate. The king, his brother, moved with a quiet, decisive cruelty. In October 2025, the announcement arrived. Andrew was stripped of his princely title. All associated honors dissolved. An exile from the very nomenclature of royalty. His residence, Royal Lodge, a bastion of inherited comfort, was next. A forced relocation. From the grandeur of Windsor to the relative austerity of Sandringham, a retreat into the shadows of a lesser estate. It was not a request. It was a pause verdict. Then came the digital deluge. January 2026. The U.S. Department of Justice, a relentless arbiter, released new data from the Epstein files. Names, dates, locations. A digital tomb opened, revealing more than just connections. It hinted at complicity. The subsequent month, February 2026, brought revelations that pierced the very security of the crown. Reports surfaced of Andrew allegedly using coded phrases, "Mrs. Windsor soon to arrive," to usher women into Buckingham Palace, bypassing standard protocols. A direct breach of trust, of security. The suggestion that confidential information, state secrets perhaps, had been shared with Epstein triggered a Thames Valley police investigation. A shadow fell over the palace walls. The scandal, once confined to Andrew's personal failings, now threatened to compromise the institution itself. New Epstein files, photos among them, resurfaced. Calls for Andrew to testify in the U.S. intensified. An email attributed to Ghislaine Maxwell appeared to authenticate the very image Andrew had long dismissed as doctored, himself with Vирджинию Джуффре. A final, undeniable piece in the pause anatomy of his fall. The foundations had not merely cracked, they had crumbled. The whisper of shared secrets, initially dismissed as mere conjecture, solidified into a chilling inventory of potential transgressions. The scope of the alleged disclosures extended beyond idle gossip. It touched upon classified intelligence briefings, sensitive diplomatic exchanges, the very fabric of national security. Andrew, it was claimed, had not merely confided in Epstein, but had, perhaps inadvertently, offered a window into the inner workings of the state. This wasn't just a breach of protocol, it was a potential betrayal of trust on a scale rarely seen within the gilded cages of royalty. The implications were stark. Foreign adversaries, lucrative deals, even the safety of operatives could have been compromised. Each piece of information, a currency exchanged in the shadows, further eroding the crown's already fragile credibility. The public, weary from years of scandal, now faced the prospect of a prince not merely entangled in sordid affairs, but potentially a conduit for state secrets. This accusation, a new weight upon his already burdened shoulders, shifted the narrative from personal disgrace to a profound national security threat. The silver spoon, now tarnished beyond recognition, had been used to stir a venomous brew. The Thames Valley investigation, now an open wound in the monarchy's side, continued its slow, methodical crawl through the wreckage of Andrew's past. Prosecutors, emboldened by the unearthed Maxwell email and the authenticated photograph, meticulously constructed their case. Their strategy: paint a picture of deliberate deception, of a man who leveraged his status for access, then lied about his involvement. The challenge, a familiar foe in such high-profile cases, lay in the passage of time. Memories fade, witnesses become elusive, documents vanish. Yet the sheer volume of new evidence, the digital breadcrumbs left by Epstein's sprawling network, provided a relentless current. Andrew's defense, funded by the king's private coffers, a bitter irony given his public ostracization, adopted a strategy of stonewalling, deny, delay, discredit. Every public statement, carefully worded, maintained his innocence, framing him as a victim of circumstance, of association, rather than an active participant. But the walls were closing in. The legal noose tightened with each subpoena, each newly discovered file. Should the prosecution succeed, the ramifications were clear. Not just for Andrew, a life of permanent exile, stripped of all vestiges of his former self, but for the institution itself. The monarchy, already fragile, faced a verdict that could redefine its very survival. A legacy, once imagined as enduring, now hung by a thread. The survival of the monarchy hung by a thread. The threads, however, were not merely legal. They were woven from the relentless public gaze. The year 2026 dawned with Andrew Mauntbеттен-Windзor, a prisoner not of a cell, but of an inescapable media frenzy. Every digital screen, every printed page screamed his name, a name now synonymous with scandal. The anatomy of his downfall was dissected daily, laid bare for judgment. He had once commanded attention, a prince of the realm, draped in the trappings of power and privilege. Now, the gilded cage of Sandringham became his personal digital tomb. The relocation to Marsh Farm, a mere footnote in the grand narrative of his life, underscored his profound isolation. No longer the Duke of York, no longer CHRH, just Andrew, a man stripped of his public persona, reduced to a ghost in the machine of royal machinations. The public trial, brutal and unforgiving, rendered its verdict long before any court could. His past prominence served only to amplify the present shame. The silence of his new existence, broken only by the whispers of the wind through the fens, was a testament to a mangled fate. He remained a solitary figure, adrift in the wreckage of his own pause-making. The aftermath was a landscape of desolation. The monarchy, an institution built on centuries of carefully curated image, now bore the indelible stain of this inventory of sins. The bitter testament of Andrew Mauntbеттен-Windsor's actions was not merely his own. It was a judgment passed upon the very concept of royal accountability. The echoes of "zero" had been drowned out by the clamor for transparency, a demand that resonated far beyond the palace gates. His legacy, once destined for the annals of dutiful service, was now irrevocably tied to the meat grinder of fame and scandal. The fatal error, the misjudgment that led him down the path of Epstein, had become a permanent scar on the face of the crown. This was the ultimate posthumous audit. Even the king's private coffers, cushioning his exile, could not purchase salvation from public memory. The shattered empire of his reputation lay in ruins. Unresolved questions lingered like a persistent fog. How much did others truly know? What secrets remained buried beneath the concrete of privilege? The shadow of the bunker, the dark corners of the past, had finally enveloped the present. The comfortable illusion of distance, of royal detachment, had evaporated, and in that hollow space, the monarchy faced its own pause reckoning.